Good evening. This is Worldview, where we examine the defining stories of our time with clarity, depth, and unwavering commitment to the facts. Tonight, we confront a deeply troubling series of events that have unfolded across American cities, raising profound questions about federal authority, accountability, and the protection of basic rights. What happens when aggressive enforcement tactics result in the loss of American lives, the mistreatment of vulnerable citizens, and a growing sense of impunity? These are not abstract debates. They are real human experiences now at the center of national scrutiny. Before we start, wherever you're watching or listening from, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. Today, we'll continue this conversation in the comments and respond to your questions. Yesterday, a public forum took place on Capitol Hill, convened by members of Congress to examine the use of force by agents of the Department of Homeland Security during immigration enforcement operations. No Republican lawmakers were present at the session, which featured emotional testimony from family members and individuals directly affected by recent incidents. Among those who spoke were the brothers of Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old mother of three and U.S. citizen who was fatally shot by an immigration and customs enforcement officer in Minneapolis on January 7, 2026. Renee Good was described by those who knew her as a loving parent, a poet who found solace in writing, and someone who nurtured kindness in her daily life. On that January morning, she became involved in an encounter during an active ICE operation in a residential area of South Minneapolis. According to accounts from local officials and video evidence that has since circulated widely, the interaction escalated rapidly. An ICE agent fired multiple shots into her vehicle, resulting in her death. The Department of Homeland Security maintained that the agent acted in self-defense, asserting that Good's vehicle movement posed an immediate threat. However, Minneapolis city leaders and Minnesota state officials who reviewed available footage disputed that characterization, describing the tactics as inconsistent with standard de-escalation practices used by local law enforcement. The brothers of Renee Good, Luke and Brent Ganger, addressed the forum with measured but unmistakable grief. They explained how, in the immediate aftermath of their sister's death, the family held on to a fragile hope that such a tragic and public loss might prompt meaningful reform in how federal immigration enforcement is conducted. They spoke of a brief period of consolation, believing the national attention and outrage could lead to changes that would prevent similar outcomes in the future. That hope, they said clearly, has not materialized. No substantial policy shifts or accountability measures have followed, despite widespread public reaction and media coverage. Their testimony carried an additional layer of pain when they learned of communications attributed to federal agents involved in related or similar incidents. During the forum, a lawmaker presented text messages reportedly sent by a Border Patrol agent in a separate but thematically connected case from late 2025 in Chicago. In those messages, the agent referenced a shooting in which he discharged 5 rounds, resulting in multiple wounds to the individual involved. The language was callous, references to the number of shots fired and entry-exit points, followed by phrases that appeared to treat the event as a point of grim pride or dark humor among colleagues. Words like, "Put that in your book, boys," and casual dismissals such as, "It is what it is," were read aloud. These messages, if accurately attributed and contextualized, raise serious concerns about culture and mindset within certain segments of federal enforcement personnel. The individual who was shot in that Chicago incident survived serious injuries, and charges against her were later dismissed by a federal judge. Yet the tone of the communications, shared among government employees, stands in stark contrast to the gravity of using lethal force against a civilian, particularly an American citizen who was unarmed. This pattern of aggressive encounters has extended beyond isolated shootings. Another witness at the Capitol Hill Forum was Aaliyah Rahman, a Minneapolis resident and U.S. citizen who lives with autism and the effects of a traumatic brain injury. On January 13, 2026, just days after Renee Good's death, Rahman was driving to a scheduled medical appointment at a specialized traumatic brain injury center when she encountered federal agents conducting an operation. Video footage captured the moment. Masked officers approached her vehicle, issued commands that she found confusing in the moment due to her neurodivergence, smashed a window, cut her seatbelt, and physically removed her from the car. She repeatedly stated that she was disabled and needed accommodation, yet the interaction continued with force. She was detained, taken to a federal facility, and later required emergency medical attention after losing consciousness. Rahman described the experience as dehumanizing. She recalled agents mocking her condition, suggesting the treatment would not have occurred if she were normal. The physical handling, being carried face down while restrained, compounded her existing medical vulnerabilities. Her legal representation has since emphasized that the encounter began as a routine drive for healthcare and ended in violence and detention, despite her citizenship and clear communication of her disabilities. These incidents occurred amid a broader immigration enforcement surge in Minneapolis, described by federal officials as one of the largest operations of its kind. The operation has involved significant numbers of ICE and Customs and Border Protection personnel deployed into urban residential neighborhoods. Critics argue that many of these agents, often drawn from border security roles, lack extensive training in community policing, de-escalation techniques, or handling complex urban environments where civilians, including citizens, may be present. On the same day as the Capitol Hill Forum, another troubling scene unfolded in South Minneapolis. Activists monitoring federal activity followed agency vehicles through residential streets to document operations. Federal officers stopped the trailing vehicles, drew weapons, ordered occupants out at gunpoint, and detained at least one person face down on the pavement. Homeland Security officials stated the detentions were for interfering with an immigration arrest. An Associated Press photographer witnessed the event, and images showed drawn firearms and individuals restrained on the ground. Witnesses reported heightened tension, with agents warning media to stay back under threat of chemical agents. These repeated displays of lethal force readiness against individuals who pose no apparent armed threat, whether family members caught in proximity to operations, disabled citizens seeking medical care, or activists exercising First Amendment rights to observe and record public actions, have fueled accusations of overreach and inadequate oversight. The absence of visible Republican participation in the forum underscored partisan divisions on the issue. Democrats leading the session highlighted what they described as disproportionate violence and a departure from professional norms. They pointed to statements from administration figures suggesting that obtaining judicial warrants for large-scale enforcement actions would be impractical and time-consuming, potentially taking decades. Instead, the emphasis has been on rapid, decisive operations. This approach has prompted comparisons to foundational constitutional protections. The Fourth Amendment guards against unreasonable searches and seizures, typically requiring probable cause and, in most cases, a warrant issued by a neutral judge. The Second Amendment affirms the right to keep and bear arms, a principle reaffirmed by the Supreme Court in District of Columbia v. Heller in 2008. Concerns arise when federal rhetoric or actions appear to bypass these safeguards or treat legal firearm possession as an automatic justification for heightened force. Broader questions emerge about the scope and culture of the Department of Homeland Security in this enforcement climate. Observers note the agency's substantial budget, recent purchases of large facilities near major cities, believed to be intended for expanded detention capacity, and continued emphasis on numerical goals or quotas for arrests and removals. Critics argue this creates pressure for volume over precision, potentially encouraging confrontational tactics. Training gaps are frequently cited. Unlike local police departments with years of urban experience and crowd management protocols, many federal immigration agents come from border-focused roles. Rapid deployment of additional personnel to interior cities may not allow sufficient preparation for the nuances of residential enforcement, where distinguishing threats from bystanders is critical. Cosmetic measures, such as announcements of body-worn cameras or tactical adjustments, have been proposed, yet on-the-ground incidents continue, suggesting these steps have not yet translated into changed behavior. No senior officials or agents involved in the high-profile cases have faced public disciplinary action or removal, reinforcing perceptions of limited accountability. The human cost is undeniable. Families mourn loved ones lost in circumstances that many view as preventable. Vulnerable individuals face trauma that compounds existing conditions. Communities experience fear that disrupts daily life, from school attendance to routine errands. Activists and journalists attempting to document events encounter armed responses, chilling the exercise of public oversight. These events challenge us to ask fundamental questions. How do we balance legitimate immigration enforcement with the protection of constitutional rights? What training, oversight, and cultural reforms are necessary to prevent avoidable tragedies? And how do we ensure that no American citizen, regardless of circumstance, faces disproportionate force from their own government? We will continue to follow every development in this story, including any official investigations, policy announcements, or further congressional action. The answers matter not only for those directly affected, but for the integrity of the rule of law and public trust in federal institutions. Thank you for joining us on Worldview. Stay engaged, stay informed, and we'll speak with you again soon. Good night.